Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting, number 136, taking place on Thursday, April 8th at 1700 UTC. My name is Long for Wisdom. I'm the governance facilitator for MakerDAO at the moment. I'm joined by nearly 50 Maker people, some of whom you have, well, if you follow these meetings, some of whom you will have heard before. All right, we've got our usual agenda to go through today. We've got regular updates from a few people. We've kind of got some specific kind of segments to discuss as well. I think we're going to talk a little bit about kind of governance and some of the issues we've had recently in getting sufficient amounts of MKR on the hat in the voting contract. We're also hopefully going to have a presentation from Seb talking about some of the real-world assets, new silver, the first reward assets, and some of the parameters that governance needs to consider when onboarding reward assets. To start off, though, I will do our usual kind of update for governance. So last week's executive is yet to pass, so that kind of ties into discussions or to the kind of topic I'm going to bring up later. So I'll kind of cover that a little bit there. So regarding polls this week, we had a surplus buffer poll to increase the system surplus buffer. That passed with the 25% burn option having a majority. So that will move to an executive once we're kind of closer to, like, the buffer is closer to full, because that kind of makes it easier for us to set it up so it burns 25% of the MPR. So we'll see action in an executive on that soon, but not immediately. We had a poll for appointing DeFi Saver as an Oracle light feed. That poll also passed. Again, we're not quite ready to put this into an executive yet. We've got to kind of get DeFi Saver set up. Maybe Nick will talk more about that in his section, I'm not sure. And then we had a poll confirming the Link-A liquidations 2.0 parameters, which also passed. Again, I'll leave this to Chris to discuss in his section, but this probably won't make it into the executive this week either. On the bright side, this week's executive may include, or should include, onboarding new silver, which is the first, or I guess the second, the first centrifuge assets that we've considered onboarding. Some of those present, I'm sure, will be excited to hear that we're finally moving forwards on that. So to give a brief, kind of brief update for what GovAlpha's been doing. So continued working with onboarding Peyton and Eli into the kind of into the various things the governance facilitator does. We've been working with SourceRed to kind of cover the grants and like the payouts. Kind of now that GovAlpha will be taking over managing that, as opposed to the Maker Foundation's grants program. We spent kind of a lot of time at the end of last week on the liquidations 2.0 parameter documentation, which we did manage to more or less finish. It's a little rough in places. It could be more complete, but we did manage to get something written for every parameter. So if you are confused as to what any of the parameters in liquidations 2.0 mean, you can kind of take a look on the community portal, and it will have descriptions there. These will also be linked to in polls and executives. Other than that, like, kind of work's continued on the MIPs portal and on kind of standardizing MIPs content a little bit, kind of just tidying things up. We're gonna add tags to everything so we can do some nice stuff on the portal. So yeah, I think that's probably the most interesting things we've been doing. So with that, I'll pass to, I think, Eli this week to do governance at a glance, or forum at a glance, I should say. It's renamed now.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli, and I'll be doing forum at a glance. We've rebranded for you this week. So first up, a 3-point summary. What do I need to know as an MKR holder? Well, I think it's fair to say that we're firing on all cylinders. The protocol reached a new all-time high of total value locked this week at $8.2 billion. The DAI supply rose to $3.17 billion, and the system surplus is now at $22 million. On to announcements. Following the call last week, members of the MKR compensation working group will soon be selected. You can apply using the links provided in Forum at a glance. We're looking for a community member holding no to little MKR, a large MKR holder representative, a third-party representative, a proposed core units representative, and lastly, a current core units representative. On to the active discussions, a new discussion by Eve Warrior, who along with the AIF team are bringing forward a discussion on around utilizing the D3M, the direct deposit DAI module as per MIP 50 on AIF to expand DAI's layer 2 reach and provide the DAO with a new revenue stream. Another discussion by P-Rose, who talks about Maker the brand and a potential DAO to DAO future. Thirdly, a discussion by El Progreso, who discusses raising the MKR requirement to initiate an emergency shutdown. And lastly, an ongoing discussion by IMMIO, who proposes launching a MakerDAO Discord channel. All of the links can be found in the Forum at a Glance forum thread. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Eli. Yeah, for future reference, I think Eve Warrior is Danny. So that kind of proposal came from Abbey. Cool. All right. Let's move into updates then, I guess. Smart contracts. You've got an update for us this week.
Yeah, I'm around.
Sure. You sound sure.
I wasn't Starlink. I'm on a different connection today. So hey everybody, Chris from Smart Contracts. So I wanted to call out, we hadn't done any work on the collateral onboarding priority sheet in a while, and so we sent Naz over to that, and he reviewed all of the line items in the sheet and added entries. So at least on the smart contracts or in our domain, those should like sort and find a priority. No collateral assessments this week. We still have PaxG in Kovan, and I just wanted to sort of send out a reminder that it's there and that people should review it, or anyone that needs to integrate with it should feel free to do so. And then a note on, so we sent NS2 DRP, which was the MIP22 collateral that we're about to push to Kovan last week. We had a couple changes that we realized. So as part of liquidations, we're going to be updating the end contract, and then there's quite possibly a change to the vow that might come over the next year. And so both of those needed to change in the manager, and we also changed the name from NS2 DRP just to RWA 002 for the token. So and so actually I'll just hop into that right now. So we deployed all of the MIP22 centrifuge new silver contracts to mainnet yesterday, and you know, with that token ID and all of the pieces that we need. So now the spell that is going to execute that and you know, put it on mainnet or in the protocol is being crafted. So so that's another big milestone. We actually spent some gas to get it out there. So so expect that in the spell this Friday. So, and then so if I just go back a bit, there we had a couple miscellaneous items where we optimized the Mega Poker. So that's been updated, and then there's some audit checking and PRs for the LP token Oracle contracts, and those are I think actually don't know if we finally got the final review on that, but I think it only needed one more sign off, and then we're still awaiting on the auditor for the Sushi Join adapter. So with regards to liquidations 2.0, we did indeed slide the date one more week. So the mainnet release will be not this Friday, but next Friday. We I just want to be super safe, and we're going through, and as we keep hitting items, we find more things, and we've been writing lots of like simulation tests and whatnot to make sure that we get that. Just prior to this call, all of us were in a session where we were reviewing the spell together, and the spell's looking pretty good. I think we're going to reconvene in the afternoon and then do all of the tests, the sort of simulation tests, and continue to go through that, and then hopefully Covan deploy will happen by the end of the day. So so that'll be in Covan, and when it is, we'll post the update in the collateral onboarding updates channel. Let's see. So that being said, we also last week finally we completed the ESM updates and the ILK registry updates, and the spell is, I guess, technically complete. It's just in review. So as well as the DSS interfaces. And let's see, we also are working on these sort of MIP45 Covan description updates. And so we're waiting on, I think PwC is going to review a bunch of the updates that we're making to the MIP just to make sure that they're accurate. So we're even getting like an audit on the like MIP45 update. And then we're also going to construct, or have begun to construct, a audit review. So basically like an audit debrief. So, taking everything that we got out of the audits and just sort of, casually discussing that with the community, and, which actions we took and which ones we didn't, and why, and whatnot. So that'll land in the forums at some point. So, and also we're waiting on, for security.makerdao, the actual audit reports to be posted. There's a PR that's there now with a couple of the reports, and I think we're waiting to hear if PwC can post their report. Obviously they're like a big auditing firm, and this is not a typical like path for PwC to like publicly release audits, and so we're trying to bring them into the 21st century, and they're trying to accommodate us. So yep, and there's no updates this week on the Optimism L2 progress, but there is a sort of exciting like forum post and announcement. I think MIP50, the D3M that's out there. So Sam, I don't know if you want to like casually just like mention that really quick, just to call it out so people can look at it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I introduced MIP50 yesterday, which is the direct deposit module. So this will allow Maker to basically inject DAI liquidity into secondary markets, which is, it's a little bit of a shift, but I think it's kind of a cool addition where we can act more like a decentral bank and sort of lend to provide liquidity for secondary markets for them to sort of do the more commercial side. So it's a shift, and people like vote whichever way you want to vote. Lots of discussion to be had, but I think it's an interesting proposal from Aave.
And then I'll just mention that there's background work happening in the community for the like OKRs and whatnot that Derek has been working on. So I think that's everything, unless anyone on the smart contracts team thinks I skipped something. I like kind of didn't linearly go through my list. I was sort of like scattershot all over it. So if I missed something, please call it out. And also if there's any questions.
Yeah, nothing really that needs to come out here. There's been a lot of ancillary contracts and things that we've noticed in preparing the spell for MIP45 that needed to be touched and updated. So that's progressing. It's just, cans of worms that they keep coming one after another.
Yeah, and we have to be really safe, and so we've just got to like walk through it very carefully.
Yeah, I think everyone appreciates the kind of care and attention you always take to doing these upgrades. So awesome. All right, let's move on to oracles. Nick, do you have an update?
Yeah. fairly quick today, right? So I think it was mentioned earlier, the DeFi Saver kind of light feed polling vote passed. So that's good to see. I'm sure they'll be very happy to hear that. That's not going to go in this Friday's executive because we still need to set up their feed infrastructure on their end. So presumably that would go into the executive next week. So super happy to have them on board. Also want to thank the smart contracts team, especially Kurt, for helping us get the finalized kind of changes and responses to the ABTK audit for the Uniswap LP Oracle back to ABTK. They're going to use that to essentially compile like a finalized, like publishable report. So hopefully we can get that out quite soon. And at that point, we would probably also, or not probably, but we would also redeploy the existing Uniswap LP oracles to conform to the changes that were made. Most of the changes are a little bit kind of styling based, but some of the important ones that Kurt was like instrumental in doing were some significant gas improvements. So I think we made like over 12%. Kurt, I don't know if you want to chime in. I think we made 12% gains on gas relative to what we have deployed on chain. And for those of you who are a little more technical minded, of the remaining gas that there's, quote unquote, left to optimize, I think like 90, I believe it was like 94, 95% of it is just storage operations, which are extremely kind of difficult to kind of subvert around. So this is pretty close to the edge in terms of gas optimizations, and in terms of bang for your buck, I don't think we're going to be pursuing trying to optimize it any further, especially with V3 kind of around the corner. So that's all fun. The patched version of SSB, which I'm sure you're all sick of hearing me talk about by now, is running well in staging. We've pushed the state size of that quite considerably, and it's been stable. So we're probably looking to release that into production in the next couple weeks. So that will be, you guys don't really see how much of a pain that is, or how much of a pain it's been, but right now we've been having to kind of frequently migrate the production system every month or two because of the state size issue, and this is going to ultimately just relieve us of that issue. So very kind of happy to get that out the door. And that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Nick. Anyone have any questions? I guess I actually have a quick question actually. After presumably with the audit updates from ABDK, we're going to redeploy the Uniswap oracles, right? Expecting that in the next month or something. Or...
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier.
Did you? Sorry, I must have missed that. All right, let's move on to Resta.
Yeah. Okay, so after spending some time on liquidations 2.0 parameters, we're again becoming more focused on new collaterals being onboarded and evaluated. So I believe smart contracts team has solved the issue with PAX Gold transfer fees, and we have a task to reevaluate our past risk assessment, which was done in October, and have this asset then onboarded in the upcoming weeks. We also updated the collateral onboarding sheet to see which collaterals are interesting to have or have high benefits to add next. But yeah, it really depends on the other teams, how much capacity they have currently to again start onboarding more collaterals now. we still need to propose liquidation 2.0 parameters for other assets. And we are proceeding with Wi-Fi right after link, and then we'll have them delivered for ETH and Red Bitcoin. And then for smaller assets, and I think the idea was to do them lastly for UniLPs. I may propose to have liquidations 2.0 parameters implemented for UniLPs maybe a bit sooner. And that's because we just recently proposed hard debt ceilings on UniLPs. And I think the aggregate debt ceiling for UniLPs is now over 200 million. So liquidations 2.0 are really needed for UniLPs as soon as possible. And this brings me to the next topic, which is the latest proposal that was released yesterday. So it's now called parameters changes proposal. So this group that used to manage rates also proposed in a separate post to have a mandate of not only proposing rate changes, but also changes related to debt ceilings and DAI savings rate. So this week we already propose changes to both rates and debt ceilings. In this, in my opinion, will make governance much more agile, especially when it comes to reacting to changes needed to debt ceilings. And for the proposal itself, this time we didn't propose any rate change or rate increase for largest 2 vaults. So I think that's the first time after 4 months, and this was despite the debt still growing. And the reason being is that we feel a bit more relaxed now when liquidations 2.0 are implemented. And so risk-wise, it's looking much better. And also because we finally saw some unwinding on USDC stablecoin vault and also on PSM, and we may want to keep the momentum going. We also proposed a few changes to both rates and debt ceilings for other smaller vaults. This is mostly related to either better or worse collateralization metrics of vaults, or again, better or worse liquidity metrics of underlying assets. And this liquidity metric is kind of becoming more and more important factor now with liquidations 2.0. And then we finally, as I said, propose a few debt ceiling increases for UniLPs. Still perhaps a bit conservative than what model suggested, but that is because, as I said, we still may need a few more weeks to implement liquidations 2.0 for UniLPs. I'm also personally a bit more optimistic about faster migration of LP liquidity from V2 to V3. And this would make maker univaults unwind faster than expected. And yeah, we would lose a lot of this demand in a short time if this truly happens faster. So we'll see about that. It's not really much to do until we have Uniswap V3 vaults supported at Maker. And yeah, that's, I think, everything from my side. Next week, we'll probably spend more time on various topics on forum. As was mentioned, there was one post that requires inputs from us, from our side. And I think it was regarding Aave DAI implementation, which is an interesting one. And there's also one about increasing Maker threshold for emergency shutdown. And yeah, we're still evaluating what the proper recommendation is, so stay tuned.
Perfect, thanks. Any questions for Rush or Risk? All right, let's move on. Reward assets. So if you want to just do your update for now, and then we'll cover the liquidations. Sorry, the
sure.
Stuff later. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so it will be quite quick. First item, we released the financial report for the previous month, so it was March. Took a little bit too much time to be done for the previous governance call last week. The big topic of the week is on onboarding a new silver, but I will detail that more on the later segment. But most of the team was on this topic most of the week. And on the other collaterals, we are still making progress with other asset originators. And we have worked on an onboarding schedule for other assets, but we need to speak first with the rest of the monetary actors to see if this is a realistic schedule or not before presenting it to the community, most likely next week. And yeah, as Primož said, we have some topics that you might want a risk to look an eye on, and we will discuss that with Primož tomorrow. And that's it for our side. If you have any question, feel free. And I think Matthew want to address success, I guess.
Sure. So long awaited, the documentation for putting together the trust structure is imminently about to be released. We did have a speed bump in the middle, which is what's caused so much of the delays. But basically starting either tonight or tomorrow, I'll be posting the equivalent of a table of contents and starting to populate with the core due diligence material of all the legal structures involved and working our way forward from diligence to documentation, probably finalizing with the trust agreement whenever that one is finalized. It is not finalized, but it's work in progress, but it's approaching a stage now where the community needs to get involved or at least be aware, have time to digest the diligence behind it. And I can explain kind of what the status of what happened, what the speed bump was, probably on the unrecorded section of the call. But documents will be coming shortly. Movement, finally.
That's good to know. Yeah, thanks for the update, Matt. Yeah, I know you've been working on it for some time, so I'm glad it's moving along. Right. So with that, let's move to operational support. Do you guys have any updates?
Yeah. Today is a little bit longer than most ones. So in case you haven't seen the post already, excited to finally announce that Juan and I have been a little bit quiet on our development of our core unit, operational support, because we've been working on a merger with Wouter's core unit. And this new core unit is called Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling. Juan will go into more details about the core unit, like an overarching kind of view, but I'll kind of give an update from what this means for operational support from our side. First of all, it's pretty exciting because a really big level up from where we last left off. It's going to retain a lot of our core mandate, but it's going to give it a little bit more structure and a little bit of strategy. The biggest change is that the SES will continue to incubate a selected, limited kind of number of core units because there's a function that's an incubator, whereas we've been kind of covering all of the core units, and that this core unit will not kind of cover like DAO-wide operational support in this traditional sense. So things like DAO resource accounting and reporting and so on. If you look on the link, we outline a little bit more detail into a lot of the projects that we've been working on as operational support, and a lot of that will be actually moving into the merger. But we will continue to support these in the next upcoming months, so not to worry that they're going to get dropped or anything like that. In terms of people, Juan will be, he will be kind of onboarding as a facilitator into SES. So he has also put forth that link. And then Wouter will be the core unit team lead for that group. And as for me, it's pretty cool to kind of come full circle. I'm kind of handing in my facilitator hat and going back to where I was like 2 years ago and how I started into Maker, which is back as a contributor. And I'll be joining SES as a contributor to that unit. But meanwhile, we'll still kind of finish up a lot of the projects that we've been supporting at operational support. And with that, I'll just hand it to Juan, who's going to give us a short overview of this sustainable ecosystem core unit.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to be quick because this these updates are already taking a little bit too long, and we'll do a specialized call for this. But to add a bit on what Amy was saying, this is aligned with our mandate, or what our mandate was, and it's we feel that with Voucher and the whole team that we're onboarding, we will reach a whole new level. So that's really good. And yeah, just for why we think that this core unit is important, it's we feel that that DAI has already established itself as a decentralized stablecoin, so that's great. And now we have the second big challenge, which is how do we grow and scale in a decentralized ecosystem, which is mainly uncharted territory as of now. So we think that if we have a core unit that's mainly acts in research and on very hands-on applications, we can have this kind of circle of continuous improvement, and having the governance and the forum to be both the input and the output. We can see what the problems are, kind of visualize and yeah, identify what the problems are and the risk, prioritize them, and then, well, kind of do the full circle, find the talent, incubate them. And well, we want to the sponsorship part. We believe that that's very important to get things going very, very fast. And finally, to complete the circle, we want to be very acts on the advisory part. So have this continuous improvement, self-accountability and auditing, and transparency and best practices. For that, for us, that's super important. We want to do it both for ourselves, and then we want to kind of set a standard for every other core unit to follow that standard. And we also want to be the trusted third party. So in case we need to do something like a dark spell or something, kind of manage that process and be able to safeguard and keep the protocol safe. So I think that's good for a very quick introduction. We have posted the MIPS set in the forum and GitHub. So we are waiting for your feedback. Please read it and let us know what you think. We also have a Discord channel that's open, and if people are more interested in, I don't know, joining or helping or seeing what's happening, you're welcome to join. And then, yeah, we will do a call, a core unit launching pod session, like the other core units we're doing, to have a more in-depth conversation about this. And yeah, I'm very, very excited to be part of this and to introduce the rest of the team soon. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions or anything else. All right, so back to you, Long.
Oh, actually, I'm going to also include our regularly scheduled updates if you scroll down to our post too. I just want to point out that there's a Know Your MIP number 7 tomorrow for Eurodai, so highly recommend attending that. And then there's a core unit launchpad session coming up for GovComs. There's the recordings for the MKR compensation framework, as well as the community call about grants. All recordings are up on YouTube as well. A few teams have gone into formal submission, which I believe Charles will go through, as well as this new kind of core unit that has just moved into RFC. Including in our interesting topics of conversation, I would recommend checking out some of these posts around, there was one that Jacek from the DAI Foundation plus Maker Foundation about KYC and AML legal kind of regulatory areas that are happening, as well as the BD team and the BD/growth core unit wants to kind of increase the communications with Maker. So that post is a really great way to encourage this kind of conversation around what they've been working on and what you'd like to see, and so on. And I also want to give a shout out to the Real World Finance team for continuously doing their monthly reports, which have been fantastic, and I highly recommend checking out. All right, and now back to you, Long.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, looking forward to going to that core unit launchpad session. Seems like a lot to talk about. So, does anyone have any other questions for either Amy or Juan now? All right, let's move on. So that brings us to MIPS. Charles, are you doing it late this week?
Yeah, it's me. I think David's off this week.
Yes, that's right. You should probably know that, but yes.
Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. So for the weekly MIPS update, this is the first week of April's governance cycle. We had formal submission begin this Monday and ended yesterday, end of day UTC. There are a total of 16 proposals formally submitted this month. Actually, all of them were sub-proposals. So no unique MIPS this month. And today we're going to have Long for Wisdom perform that typical governance cycle submission review to determine which of the proposals are in accordance with guidelines and follow the framework, as well as which ones should be included in the inclusion polls that come next Monday. So looking at the formal submissions this month, we had 4 core units be proposed. So this includes 3 proposals: the core unit overview or manifesto, the budget, and the facilitator onboarding for it. We had growth, content production, MakerDAO shop, and protocol engineering all be put forward. Otherwise, there's 3 proposals for amendments. There's a proposal to update MIP 0, MIP 4, and MIP 9. So definitely check those out. And lastly, we had the declarations of intent for EuroDAI. And that's it for this month. Next week, we'll have the inclusion polls go live depending on Long's review just after this. They'll run from April 12th at 4 p.m. UTC to April 15th, right before the governance call. And just as a general reminder, in order for these inclusion polls to actually pass, the yes votes need to be greater than the no votes plus the default inclusion threshold, which is 3,000 MPR. So definitely don't forget to vote if you really support any of these proposals, so we can get those forward to the next stage. And then next Thursday, Long will perform the inclusion poll review to see which of the proposals are eligible for the monthly governance poll that next Monday. In terms of other updates, we had a bunch of newly submitted proposals to RFC this week, as well as a couple over the past few weeks. The first one is the one that Juan just gave an overview of, the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit. I don't really need to give an overview because he did, but the mission or vision is to support the decentralized, effective, and scalable economy on top of Maker Protocol and continues to push forward the growth in a sustainable manner. We had a pretty big MIP get proposed to kind of revamp the monthly governance cycle led by Long for Wisdom. This proposal is replacing the current monthly cycle with the 3 voting periods, basically replacing it with one vote that will last 2 weeks. I can paste it in the chat here, or if someone else can, that'd be great to give it a review. But I generally think this is a great proposal for making the monthly governance cycle more efficient and accessible and less taxing in terms of participation for governance participants. The last one is MIP 50, the direct deposit module. As Sam mentioned earlier, this proposal is a smart contract implementation for a direct deposit module for Maker with Aave. And the other 2 core units that were proposed over the past couple of weeks are the Strategic Marcoms core unit and the Governance Communications core unit. So that's by Kathleen at Maker and David Utro, who we all know as well. And lastly, just the community greenlight polls for this month will begin on April 19th and will run as usual for 2 weeks as well. So yeah, that's it for me today.
Great, thanks, Charles. Yeah, I'll just confirm that all those sub-proposals are fine to move into inclusion polls next week. As before, we'll kind of group the core unit proposals into kind of, so we have 1 poll for the 3 facilitator mandates and budget parts, just to kind of save everyone voting on 16 different things, or 16 different, half the same things. The one point I did want to make actually was that I double checked some of the budget proposals for the core units that are being submitted. I just want to kind of remind people, the authors, to kind of add the required like budget implementations. So like including like a payment address and like when payments are kind of expected, right, for the core units if everything passes. Just because it helps a lot if there's a public, because otherwise I have to kind of chase up with you afterwards, and then we just put something in the executive and governance doesn't know if it's correct or not. So it's good to have those communicated publicly.
Yeah, Long, so regarding putting the address in the MIP, because I asked myself the question, and the issue is if you want to change it because you lost your keys or whatever, it's becoming quite difficult because you have to do the whole MIP process again. So I mean, that might lead to some complications.
For something like that, I think it's fine. I'm like, I don't think we're gonna force people to go through the MIP, like do the budget MIP again to change the address.
Okay.
It should just be posted publicly, like if it's changing, right, like post in the thread saying we need to change this to this for this reason, right? And then we'll update the MIP and things.
Okay, makes sense. Cool.
But yeah. All right. Okay, so that covers MIPs, that covers submission review, such as it was. Cool. All right. So before we move on to real assets stuff, kind of going to talk a little bit about some issues we've noticed recently in the, I guess, with like the kind of executive process. So we kind of discussed this a little bit like the other week in relation to the monthly governance cycle. But we're kind of just generally finding it's starting to look like it's becoming more and more difficult to get enough MKR to pass executive proposals. Like we haven't thus far had any weeks where we've not passed it before. We reach Friday and need to put up the next one. It's looking like we might hit that this week, given that it's like kind of Thursday and it's only got 27K on it and it needs like 50K. Yeah, Chris saying no in recent memory. Yeah. So we're kind of thinking about possibilities to kind of mitigate the issue because there are kind of security aspects with relation to like the hat being too low. And there's obviously like governance efficiency issues if we can't pass things effectively. So maybe, I mean, so we've kind of discussed some possibilities to kind of resolve this, or not resolve this, but help mitigate this. One of them is to kind of bring forward the kind of governance rewards or staking rewards proposal to try and encourage people to leave MKR in the governance contract. And the other possibility we're considering is some form of like delegation, right? We kind of discussed, I mean, delegation's always been planned in like DSS Gov, but it's probably doable for us to implement like a kind of quick and dirty version faster than DSS Gov.
Yeah, so I'll just mention that DSS Gov is kind of the next big project we're planning to tackle on the smart contracts end. So it's coming, but we don't have a time frame for that. We might want to try and get some of these little things like the Vox and the Flash knocked out before that, just for some quick wins. But I think it's possible that we might need a shorter term solution just to getting things done. So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I'll add a little color, like, you know, DSS Gov envisioned as like a big monolithic update might just be a little bit too slow moving to address these more urgent problems. So I think actually the DSS Gov is now a code word more for, you know, what exactly are the highest priority things and how do we address them in an order and a timeline that makes sense. Right. So yeah, if that means an intermediate solution or something that's more flexible and easier to extend over time with modules, and we can add features piecemeal, you know, I think we're at this point kind of considering all options of what makes the most sense to solve the problems in a good time frame.
Yeah, and I'll add for the Gov rewards. So this can be deployed for both DSS Gov as well as the current chief. It uses the IOU token, so it doesn't require DSS Gov. And additionally, because the revenues are so high recently, we can actually offer pretty high APY to people locking Maker into the chief. Like, for example, if there's sort of like 10% deposited into this contract, which is higher than what is voting right now, APOYs will be about 33%, which is, you know, it's not as high as maybe some of the farming yields, but it's like, it's comparable considering how safe it is.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that for funding these, well, obviously, they have to come from like the surplus buffer, right? So it's DAI that potentially would have gone to burn MKR, right?
Yeah, this would be redirecting the entire burner. But you know, these are rates that are high enough that may attract some of the Maker that's currently sitting in Aave, which is getting more and more dangerous. It's currently at like about 85% of the hat, which is like available for like being borrowed, which is pretty dangerous in my opinion. And I think we can start chipping away at that with higher yields than 0.
Yeah, just to clarify, we wouldn't necessarily use the entire burner to fund staking.
Yeah, that's just an example. And sorry, actually, let me clarify. I said 33%. If we were to redirect the entire burner, it would be 50% APY on a 10% locked up.
Yeah, so there's kind of been some discussion about like what sort of APYs we need to target or should target, and like obviously the other risks in terms of turning on like I'm going to call them staking rewards from now on because it's more accurate to what they are, right? Because it's not actually rewards for voting, but more for just locking Maker in the chief contract. Yeah, needless to say, like governance obviously would need to approve any diversion of funds to that kind of contract. So yeah, maybe Chris, if you don't mind, could you kind of comment briefly on like the options around like delegation?
Yeah, you're saying using the vote proxy.
Yeah, or some like sort of variant of it, right?
Yeah. Yep. So and I'm sure this code that I wrote some code like way back when we were in Osaka that I kind of abandoned while we were in Osaka, but the idea is that you could use the vote proxy that we have, which has the sort of hot and cold wallet to act as a type of delegate. So like instead of just locking into your own vote proxy, you lock into this vote proxy that delegates the voting. And so then it handles all of the sort of primitives of dealing with the chief for voting the same way the current vote proxy does. But because it's a proxy, you can also like take those IOU tokens and you could do something with them or make the proxy itself the thing that does something. Yeah, so I think that was generally it. I don't know. I think at the time, I think I was thinking of like a vote proxy like individually, but like per delegate or something, and that might be the methodology that we're thinking of. I don't know if you guys were considering, using like the multisig or something like that as the delegate. I don't know, but there's a lot of design space there, but it is theoretically possible to just sort of bolt delegation on top of the existing voting system. Now, I think everything else needs to really be thought through. Like, sort of immediately, I think of if you're doing MKR rewards, you don't want to get trapped in a situation where like a bunch of people show up to sort of farm the rewards, and then they like drop their MKR on a hat. They pass one executive, and then no one really cares at that point. Like they're just sitting there farming rewards, and so we can never pass another executive. I mean, I think we very much want to think of like what's the problem we're trying to solve here, and it's pretty much like governance participation. We need people to actually like be participating every week, and deciding whether or not they want an executive to go through. And so that would just be, these mechanism designs can get really hairy. And yeah, that's my only caution when we're thinking about this. I'm worried if we try and do it too quickly. So
Yeah.
So with the Gov rewards, it's sort of targeting the individual who's currently has their maker in Aave because they're getting good yield. They kind of want to vote, all things being equal, but the APYs are just way too high. So that's the type of user I want to target with this.
Yeah, which you need some sort of decay.
Yeah, the danger is the 50,000 maker that's sitting on the proposal back in December that hasn't been moved. That's currently where the hat is right now. And if people just put MKR in the most recent hat and just earn those rewards to set it and forget it, we may want, just as just spitballing, you may want the rewards only to be valid for hats if the MKR is on the top 3 most recent hats, something that encourages people to. You don't want them to vote blindly, but you also don't want it to just sit out there and forget it.
Yeah, to be clear, this Gov rewards is for locked up maker and the chief. They do not have to vote to get this. And I don't think we should require them to vote because this is not a sort of force people to vote incentive. It's sort of like a get the maker off Aave incentive.
Fair point, fair.
Right, but if they show up and they just vote on that week's executive as they're getting it in the chief, and then they walk away, game over. Right, we're locked out for.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, maybe we could ramp it up slowly to kind of distribute people coming in who are not willing to participate.
Yeah, and we could also have a delegation decay in the vote proxy, so you could slowly decay someone's delegation.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be happy if just my transactions were comped, right? Like that's the biggest hurdle that I see.
Yeah, so that is one advantage of having the staking rewards, just because you have people who have MKR locked up in the chief. They're also getting some amount of DAI, right? For voting for them is now there's much there's a much smaller barrier of entry to voting then, just because they already have MKR in the chief. They're getting comped some amount of DAI for that, so that makes the kind of gas cost easier to swallow, right? So. I mean, personally, I'm hoping that if we do implement this, then we do see more participation based on the fact that, the fact of those lowered barriers. To comment as what Chris said, though, there are definitely risks around doing rewarding staking, right? We can end up with ourselves locked out. We can end up bringing in a bunch of MKR that is only interested in rewards and will always vote for more rewards and nothing else. There are a couple of failure cases we need to be careful of and consider before doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we need to be very careful about just the status quo, though. I think we're in a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. If we can't pass this week's executive, then putting up another one probably isn't going to help. So we presumably have to skip. So if we can't pass last week's executive, we presumably have to skip this week's, which then pushes back everything else, right? So yeah, it is something we need to resolve pretty urgently, even apart from the issues around the hat, right?
Yeah, and we have liquidations 2.0 coming out. If we can't pass any of that, the protocol's in a lot of danger. So.
I guess a lot of feedback I was getting with the governance rewards MIP was that there's some fear around the kind of messing with the inherent incentive of the buyback and burn model. I don't know if there's a smart way to cap that, or if it's just kind of us realizing that, hey, that's going to make a risk that we're going to have to tinker with that in order to promote this, or what. But I felt like a large amount of the criticism could kind of be looped into that, kind of taking a tax advantage structure, making it non-tax advantaged, and then potentially messing up the entire incentive structure for MKR holders.
It's definitely a concern, but I mean, I don't really want to be messing around with worrying about taxes when we have sort of an existential threat here. So, maybe we can come up with some better tax strategy later, but right here and right now. I think we need to do something like be it delegation or gov rewards or whatever.
I think Aaron was right, because the main issue we have right now is we cannot pass any executive as of today. So we need to find a way to find people to vote. I mean, any smart contract will not help if you cannot pass an executive. And if you can pass one, we might be able to pass a few before people start to vote. So maybe we should focus on making some noise and get our voters back to vote.
That has worked in the past. I mean, you know, we could just audit the protocol and find a bug, and then that'll get people to come back and vote on something. So
it's arguably a bug if we can't do anything, right?
Yeah, it is.
yeah, can I ask, is this because it, you know, if I'm thinking about like going all the way back to Psy and whatnot, like we had many executives that didn't pass back in those days, and obviously like the curse prevented us from passing a bunch of things as well. It feels like it's been about a year, maybe a little bit longer, since we've really had something that we haven't been able to pass. Does this time feel different? Like, are we already at the, like, you know, DEFCON 1 super urgency, like we can't get people to pass stuff?
So that's kind of hard to judge, right? Because, you know, there's no guarantee that this is a participation issue, right? It might just be that for whatever reason people don't like this executive. I personally think it's unlikely, because some of it's kind of already been signed off in terms of the core year budgets. The kind of other things are just kind of regular debt ceiling increases. The only like possibly contentious one is increasing the PSM debt ceiling by like 1 billion DAI. So like it could be that people just really don't want that. But like we had the poll for that previously as well, and that passed, right? So it's kind of hard to say like that's definitely the reason. I kind of feel like we've seen a pattern of like sort of participation decreasing over the last while, right? Like in general, like executives used to kind of tend to pass, you know, like the Monday or like the Sunday right after they went off on Friday. Like more recently, it's been kind of like Wednesday, like Tuesday. Like in this case, like it's Thursday and we haven't passed it. So yeah, I think we're getting to the point where we need to do something, Chris.
Is there a way to just reimburse gas cost?
I mean, there will be in like the London hard fork. We could have like a.
There are ways you can do it right now, right? You just have a record of the transactions, and you know you have whoever, you know, someone, you know, you can say mint DAI out of the executives into like some Merkle claim contract, or have some designated third party sending the DAI, or whatever you want. So yes, it's certainly possible to try to reimburse gas costs.
Yeah. I'm just guessing that that's the main deterrent.
Gonna
The
go on a
average
limb, but
voter.
yeah, gonna go on a limb, but somebody who has 25,000 maker, if they're worried about $12, we have other issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think voter apathy is probably a big problem as well, but it's a good point. It's like it's hard to measure exactly why aren't more people voting. Like it'd be good to try to get a read on that. Like what's the MKR weighted reason for not voting?
Maybe we can get people to vote on it.
Like we got pretty good participation like a year ago before the farming stuff started. So it's my guess that it's just this sort of Aave problem where there's just way more efficient allocations of your capital than locking it up in voting.
But
that's my guess.
So take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I'm one of those people that has their MKR on Aave. But the amount of MKR on Aave is not that much with respect to the outstanding supply of MKR. So there is a shit ton of MKR out there that is, one, not voting, and two, not being used to yield farm through Aave. So in terms of, like, for me, the focus is delegation, right? There are people out there who have MKR who are not voting, who may or may not be comfortable delegating that MKR. And if we can answer that question, like, then I think we're in good shape. And then we also don't have to spend like a shit ton of money from the surplus to get that rewards. But once again, I'm super biased. So yeah.
I'll object to the word spend there, because it's like, whether it goes out through the burner or the rewards, it's like, without the details, it's roughly the same sort of thing. It's like profit taking either way. It's not spending.
Oh, okay, true. I'll give you that.
Well, I mean, to me, some of the real question here is just the hurdle. Like right now, there's 27,000 some odd makers supporting the most recent proposal, but it has to get to 50 because of the MKR that's blocking it, the hat from whatever it was in December. I mean, the shortest term path that I see that would allow us to break through this is to have, a hat can only be the governing proposal if it's, less than 120 days, something that keeps it fresh.
Yeah, that 50K there, I think that's there for security and not so much people consciously trying to block new proposals.
But what's the difference? That's where I'm getting at, is that if 27,000 is the security threshold, then that should be the number. It should be something that keeps people should want to put their MKR there. And I'm not disputing what you said, Nick, about the governing and the allocation of it, or whether or not we should have rewards. I think we should have all of it. The real question is just what's the shortest critical path that can help break through the logjam.
Yeah, so I think it's at 50K because Aave is at 43K, and it's blocking people who borrow and then nuke the protocol.
Yeah, but they can vote on the December one and the new one at the same time.
Maybe they can't vote. And I'm speculating. I don't know who holds this maker.
I mean, we just have to address the fact that like investors don't want to work for their money, right? They want their money to work for them. And so a lot of people just buy expecting their tokens, tokens to be burned, collect the gains from that. Like I think long term, the solution is automating as much of this as possible so that we don't have to rely so much on that. But in the short term, I would personally love to delegate just to avoid the transactions every week. And it's a lot of overhead to keep track of everything that's going on, even for those of us in the thick of it.
And to address your point that you outlined a moment ago, though, about nuking the protocol, Sam. I mean, I think in parallel to any type of suggestion changing the structure I was outlining of the hat, it's a question of what the forum posts whenever we get some consensus at some point, but raising the emergency shutdown threshold from 50,000 to something significantly more material, I do believe is in line.
All right. I feel like we've had some good perspectives here, and we'll kind of carry on discussing the possible options, I think, over the next few days. For now, though, we should potentially move on, because we do have one other thing on our agenda. Seb, do you want to kind of do this presentation today, given that hopefully we'll be able to have an executive this week?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can do it and hope that at some point it will pass. We don't know. We never know. Maybe it will solve. The issue will be solved in the few hours, so it could be useful.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, that's kind of the point. If we don't have it now, then that's awkward. So.
Yeah, but let's be optimistic. Can you give me the opportunity to share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to now.
And here we go. Okay, so let me present the new silver onboarding, which is another called MIP 22. So just a brief agenda, I will go quickly, but please you can stop me anytime you want to ask a question. So New Silver is a fix and flips loans in the US. So it's the first facilitator from Centrifuge that will be onboarded. It's short-term real estate bridge loans. The MIP6 submission was on July 2020, and the pool is already live for months now. And there is more than 3 million committed to it. And there is 13 underlying loans, so it's already active, already used. You can see the drop, which is the senior tranche, the one we will invest in, and the teen tranche, which is the equity portion of this pool. The proposed debt ceiling is at 5 million, so that's nothing new, but good things to remember. It started as MIP22, but then the idea was to shorten the time to production. So the idea was to reuse MIP21 in front of MIP22, which is itself the connector to the Teen Lake pool. So you have an asset originator that put assets and tokenize them on the Teen Lake pool. Some investors are buying drop and Teen token directly from the Teen Lake pool. MIP22 is doing the coordination. And what is done is that when there is some cash needed, up to the debt ceiling that we suggest, the MIP22 will ask Maker to get the money. And if there is some reimbursement or some new drop investors that put money inside the Teen Lake pool, the money will flow to reimburse the loan as soon as possible. So if Maker is used, the reserve, the cash balance of the Teen Lake pool is always close to zero. There is a collateralization ratio between the NS2 drop and the DAI ratio, but of 105%. And then there is a MIP22 item that will do the interaction directly with the Maker vault. And we can liquidate at any time, and there will be the reason, although for the MIP21, is that we need a placeholder token for emergency shutdown because the drop is a security. So it's not possible to give it to people that will own DAI at emergency shutdown. So we will use a placeholder token just like 6S to be given to people if there is a need. Regarding the smart contract team, only MIP21 is in the perimeter of Maker. MIP22 is not on the Maker perimeter, so it was not as much audited as we can expect, but I still spend a lot of time on it. But so it's not there is no guarantee that MIP22 is working. For the liquidation. So liquidation, like for success, is triggered by governance. There can be two reasons to liquidate. One, a covenant in breach. We will see what are the covenants later. So this will be monitored by the real world finance core unit. And the second option is when MakerDAO, governance in general, wants to stop the investment for any reason. So liquidation, actually what it does, it doesn't sell the drop token on the market because there is no market for that. It will just ask for redemption of the drop token. And how it works is that in Teen Lake, when someone wants to redeem their drop token, if there is any cash flow that is coming to the Teen Lake pool, it will go to redeem the drop token before the Teen token and before making the investment. And the average maturity of the portfolio is 13 months. So it will take around 30 months to get most of the money back. It's a two-step liquidation. So this is the same due to MIP21. We start with a soft liquidation, which is a tail function. I will give a more detailed description after, that asks for the drop redemption to the Teen Lake pool. This is the MIP22 part. And then we can call the hard liquidation, which calls the curl functions. And the only difference here is that it deprecates the remaining part of the DAI loan using the surplus buffer. I will explain a bit later. After the soft and the hard liquidation, we can get money back from the Teen Lake pool. So here is an infographics of what is happening inside the Teen Lake pool when we are using it, or when Teen Lake is using Maker. So currently the Tin Lake pool has 500,000 DAI as reserves, the cash balance. Let's say they will invest in a loan that will decrease the cash balance, but they will still be above the DAI. So there will be no interaction with the maker. On the second loan investment, they will draw the credit line on maker, and the maker will mint 200,000 DAI. Let's say that after that, someone is investing into the Tin Lake pool using drop, then this will generate some cash on the Tin Lake pool, and to avoid paying interest on the credit line, Tin Lake will repay a part of the loan. Then if there is a new investment, it will increase the credit line. And if there are some loans that are reimbursed, obviously the credit line will decrease. So that's the normal times, but you have the link to the code on the left. What happens if there is a liquidation? So let's say we ask for liquidation. When we call the tail function, nothing really happens inside the vault and inside the surplus buffer. Let's say the vault is close to 5 million and the surplus buffer is 30 million. What happens is that after some time, the Tin Lake pool will get some DAI due to the rent, to the interest rate, due to the repayment of the loans, and it will repay slowly the debt, which can take up to the maturity of the loan, which is up to, let's say, on average, 13 months. Let's say at some point we decide that, okay, there is too much risk here, and we should take the loss. Just say that it's unlikely that we'll get all the money back. So if we want to be careful and prudent, we can use the hard liquidation. So that's another action that governance can take. And this will just move, declare all the debt as lost, and will reduce or create a scene in the surplus buffer and reduce the surplus buffer by the same amount of the loan that will never get back on the vault. And from there, the vault is no longer really used. But even after this hard liquidation, when we say we have lost everything, we can still get some money back because there is no implication on the Tin Lake pool. And when we get money back, as we cannot decrease the debt on the vault, it will go to increase the surplus buffer. So that's the two options that we can do on the liquidation. Regarding the legal part, so we will have New Silver, which is asset originator. We will have New Silver pool, which will be the SPV, which is separated from New Silver. So in case of New Silver being bankrupt, the pool will continue. So to formalize the right to have an audit on New Silver, I made a drop subscription into the Tin Lake pool. So you will be able to see this drop subscription because in MIP21 there is one parameter which is a link on IPFS, and you will have all the listing of all the rights and obligation of a drop investor. And Maker is not contractually a drop investor, but as it uses the same smart contracts that other drop investors, if one drop investor wants to get his money back from the Tin Lake pool, it applies the same for Maker. There will also be a side letter that is already signed to formalize the audit right that Real World Finance have on the SPV. So we have access to all the underlying data, all the bank financial statement and stuff like that. And we will add Citadel SPV, which is an SPV service provider, to be appointed as an independent director. So why that? Is currently NS Pool is managed by the same people than New Silver. So obviously, if New Silver goes bankrupt, it's unlikely that someone will continue to manage the SPV. It's possible, but let's say the worst case. And New Silver can ask, NS Pool LLC can ask for voluntary bankruptcy. And we don't want to do that. So the independent director, his main task will be to say no to any voluntary bankruptcy filing. which is not a very hard task, but still something important to be sure that there is a real bankruptcy remoteness from New Silver to NS pool. And the independent creator will also be able to clean a little bit the mess if there is a need to do that. So that was on the legal. Let's discuss the parameters. So on the parameters, with a debt ceiling at 5 million, the stability fee would be set at 3.6%. And on the MIP21, which is the interface and which is the contract that will be deployed in the executive spell, there is 3 parameters. One is tau. Tau is the delay between the soft liquidation and the hard liquidation. The minimum delay, we cannot call the hard liquidation, let's say 1 day after the soft liquidation, if tau is 7 days. For success, it will be 1 year. For this collateral, we suggest to use 0, because it doesn't make sense to have something greater than 0, because it's our decision and there is no impact anyway on the other side. TNEC doesn't see the difference if you call the hard liquidation. So the doc will be a link, an IPFS link to the drop subscription, representing the right of the real-world finance facilitator to enable and enforce MakerDAO rights, a side letter to validate rights. At scale, I think it would be wise to create a legal entity. I'm not sure how to do that now, but we will find out. To hold all those drop tokens inside a legal entity that can be shared by many coordinates. I don't know exactly how. And there is a val parameter, which is just, so inside the MIP21, there is one placeholder token, and this placeholder token should have any value. And the value should be above the debt ceiling, because you cannot borrow from an asset that is lower than the debt ceiling. But using anything above the debt ceiling doesn't change much. It's mainly for accounting, and it represents the approximate value of the asset that is against the loan drawn from the vault. So we will use a debt ceiling plus 2 years of stability fees, but it could be something a bit different. It will not matter too much. Just to go back on the level of collateralization that we will using in this collateral. So they will be, most will be enforced by TNEC and will be controlled by the real-world finance core unit every month, because we will look on the loan tape, every loan, add the value of each loan, and see if there is if the parameters are still okay. So the SPV collateral ratio. So here on the bottom, you have all the underlying loans. So when someone comes to New Silver to borrow, they will want to put some collateral against the loan. So this is on the right. This is a house that someone wants to buy and renovate. This person will put some equity upfront, which is this dark gray area, and he will ask a loan from New Silver, which is the light gray area. This light gray area, which is the underlying loan, will be inside the SPV. It's one of the assets of the SPV. To finance those loans, the SPV will have some equity, which is the tin tranche, and we'll have some debt, which will be the drop tranche. On the drop tranche in the light blue, we'll have the drop owned by other people, not maker people. And on the middle blue, you will have what is used to borrow against the maker vault. And again, the maker vault, we have the DAI that we have loaned. And here's the difference between the value of the drop that are used to take the loan and the loan. So the SPV collateral ratio is the light gray area divided by the bottom of the blue section, and should be always above 108%. Actually, Tilnake enforced something a bit bigger, but in any case, if it goes a bit below, we will let a little threshold in case of. And the mid-volt collateralization ratio is 105%, which is the blue line, the blue area here, divided by the yellow here. And when you multiply both, you have 113%. So this shows that we have a good amount of collateral at the right, and we land almost a bit more than half of the actual collateral. But there is many levels of securitization. So we have updated our dashboards that we have prepared earlier this year with the actual data, because we are lucky that the pool is already live. So we already have some loans to work on. So you can see that the SPV collateral ratio is above 108%. It's quite above that. So that's good. The other parameters doesn't work currently because they haven't borrowed anything yet. So that doesn't work. Obviously, the co-investor ratio is 100% because we haven't invested anything. You can see below the different other covenants, soft covenants that we have added to the risk assessment. And you can see that no borrower has a loan above $500,000. As a maximum borrower exposure for high FICO score and low FICO score are respected. And we have the state exposure, which is respected as well. But as you can see, it's currently respected because they still have a quite a good reserve of cash that is used in this metric, but is not used in this nice chart below that show you what are the states where the loans are made. And currently, a lot of loans are made in Florida, a lot, still less than 1/2. And you have also the FICO score quality with the split between low quality and high quality. The last date of the due diligence, those are the financial due diligence to see if the company are in good shape. And you can see that New Silver has invested in the team, so they have skin in the game. That is correct. And here we are. Happy to take some question if you have some.
So my only question is that there's a lot to unpack, and I would like to ask 100 questions about each slide. So maybe we should schedule a different call. I don't know if it's interesting for the community to do a call specifically for this, but I think it would be useful.
Yeah, sure. That's something we can do.
Yeah, I just want to say, Seb, I found that really useful. I feel like I understand it a lot better now than I did before. So thanks.
So maybe for everyone that's not long for wisdom, we should have a call.
I guess I did have a brief question. I figured this was kind of implied by your presentation, but basically we kind of don't have a recourse on the loans, correct? Like if they do go bad, they go bankrupt forced rather than voluntary, we just have to eat the loss, correct?
What loan are you speaking of? The underlying one, the ones New Silver is making to the borrowers?
Yeah, I guess it's actually our vault that I'm speaking of, right? Like if New Silver were to go completely under, then we don't have any real collateral, correct?
No, that's not correct, because we have still the drop tokens. And the good thing is that if we are not repaid, that means that my investment is not repaid as neither. And I want to be repaid. Okay, to be honest, it's 100 DAI, so I don't really care. Because I had issue with KYC all the weekend for my legal company, and I didn't have the cash on hand to invest more personally with my public account.
Sorry, Sebastian. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. Hi, Kirill.
Sorry, this is Kirill from New Silver. I'm sorry I was late. Yeah, I just wanted to answer Peyton's last question here. As far as as far as I understood, so let's say we go bankrupt, New Silver goes bankrupt, the collateral is assigned to the SPV, which is bankruptcy remote. So it's going to have the independent director. So the vault is still collateralized by the loans. The loans will never go to zero because this is U.S. based real estate. So, I mean, the chance of it going to zero would probably mean there's, a nuclear war going on or something like that. Even in that case, I don't know, but I think that there is a chance that the borrower could default on the loan to us, and then we have various various mechanisms to collect, and at the end of the collection, which only is about 5% or so of all of the loans that default, we could go to foreclosure, which just means that there is a delayed collection, but we still collect. It does not go to zero.
Yeah, and inside the SPV, the operating agreement says that as soon as the SPV gets some money from the loans, it is obliged to put it in the TILNIC pool. And the TILNIC pool is a smart contract, so even if there is no contractual obligations, the smart contract will do what the smart contract will do, which is the hard-coded, and which means repay every drop holders. If it's a legal entity, if it's a person, if it's a DAO, the smart contract doesn't care.
Gotcha, that makes sense. So it's just the kind of practical function of we need to mark it down because all these legal processes could take a while for us to get paid back. So we just write it as a total loss, and then whatever collateral we're able to scrape back gets added back into the buffer.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Thank you. That was really helpful.
And yeah, so I just checked today just to look at the SPVs that were used during subprime. And the level of safety of this SPV is quite similar to the real estate mortgage-backed securities during the crisis. And during the crisis, the loss was, on subprime, it was less than 1%. And on the non-subprime, it was 2%. It was actually a bit more because the numbers are not the same. So that means that we have all the TIN buffer that protect us if there is a default on the borrower side. And that means that even if the price of a home in US decreased by, I don't know, 25%, we might not lose anything.
Yeah, I would just add that the default assumption is 50% recovery, worst case, and our collateral ratio will cover 4 of those, which is 200% losses. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing is that the whole market is collapsing, and then we have a protection of I think it's 25%, something like that. It's a bit more, I guess, depending on how you look at the numbers. But the other case that can happen is that 1 or 2 borrowers will default, and that will happen. It never happened for New Silver until now, but I'm on the risk side, so I will say it will happen at some point. And if that happens, we will not see it. We will not care at all because it's way above the buffer that we have in this pool. So what is Phil is saying that we can wait for 4 borrowers to default before having to care.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Seb, for that. Thank you, Carol, for coming, and for Lucas for sticking around. I think we're probably coming to the end of the meeting. So as Juan said, maybe we organize a separate meeting to kind of go over this in more detail for those that are interested. Yeah, I think we'll wrap up there for today. So yeah,
Maybe what Kate wrote in the chat. Sorry, Long, to interrupt you.
That's right.
We do have we are planning a community call focused around centrifuge that we hope to discuss this in more detail, and I will definitely also post it on the forum. And I think Seb, you're attending as well, right? So
Yes.
that would be also a good place to ask questions and understand more. Yeah, less work for you, Juan.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucas. Anybody else have any final comments before we wrap up for the week?
Yeah, very quick comment. Tomorrow we have the Eurodie with Tim Shupi and well, also Seb. So anyone interested, it's at 1 p.m. UTC, so a little bit earlier for the Americas maybe, but hopefully you can make it. And yeah, it's a Know Your MIP session, I think number 6, and it's going to be great, I think. So come join us.
Awesome. All right, thanks everyone. I'll talk to you all soon.
Bye.